Chapter 1. Who is Alexander the Great? Alexander the Great is one of the most famous leaders in history. He was a king, a warrior, and a visionary. Even though he lived more than 2,000 years ago, people still talk about his incredible achievements. He built one of the largest empires the world has ever seen and changed history forever. Alexander was born in 356 BC in Macedonia, a kingdom in northern Greece. By the time he was 20 years old, he became king. Over the next 12 years, he led his army across 3 continents, defeating powerful enemies and creating a vast empire. His conquests spread Greek culture and ideas across Asia, Africa, and Europe. But Alexander was not just a warrior, he was also a smart and curious leader. He loved learning, and his teacher was Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers in history. This education helped him become not only a strong fighter but also a great thinker. In this video, we will explore Alexander's life, from his early years to his great battles and his lasting impact on the world. How did he become such a powerful leader? What made his army so successful? And why is he still remembered today? Let's find out. Chapter 2. Early Life and Education. Alexander the Great was born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of Macedonia. His father was King Philip II, a strong and powerful ruler who built a great army. His mother was Queen Olympias, a smart and ambitious woman who believed Alexander was special. She told him that he was a descendant of the Greek hero Achilles and the god Zeus, which made Alexander believe he was born for greatness. From a young age, Alexander showed signs of being a great leader. He was strong, brave, and loved to learn. When he was 10 years old, his father brought him a wild horse named Bucephalus. No one could control the horse, but Alexander noticed that it was afraid of its shadow. He turned the horse toward the sun so it could not see the shadow and then jumped on its back. The horse became his loyal companion and carried him through many battles. When Alexander was 13 years old, his father hired a famous teacher for him, Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of all time. Aristotle taught him science, philosophy, history, and literature. Alexander loved learning about Greek culture, myths, and heroes. He was especially inspired by Achilles, the great warrior from Homer's Iliad. He wanted to be like Achilles, a fearless and legendary leader. Alexander also learned about war strategy and leadership from his father. He watched Philip II build a strong army and win many battles. By the time Alexander was 16, he was already leading soldiers in battle. His education and experience helped him become a powerful leader at a very young age. His early years shaped him into the man who would later conquer much of the known world. He was not just a warrior but also a thinker, a dreamer, and a leader who believed he was destined for greatness. Chapter 3. Rise to Power. Alexander's journey to becoming king was not easy. In 336 BC, when he was just 20 years old, his father, King Philip II, was assassinated. No one knows exactly who was responsible, but some believe it was part of a conspiracy. After Philip's death, Alexander was declared king of Macedonia. However, his position was not secure. Many people questioned whether a young man could rule such a powerful kingdom. As soon as he became king, Alexander faced many threats. Some rivals in Macedonia and other Greek city-states saw Philip's death as an opportunity to rebel. Alexander acted quickly. He removed all rivals who could challenge his rule, including enemies inside his own family. In Greece, some city-states, including Thebes and Athens, thought about breaking away from Macedonian control. To show his strength, Alexander marched his army to Thebes and completely destroyed the city, leaving only the temples and the house of the poet Pindar. This sent a clear message: rebellion would not be tolerated. After securing Greece, Alexander turned his attention to his father's greatest dream, conquering the Persian Empire. Philip II had already started preparing for an invasion, but after his assassination, the plan was left unfinished. Now, Alexander was determined to continue his father's mission. Before attacking Persia, Alexander needed a powerful army. He inherited one of the best-trained armies in history from his father. The Macedonian army used a special formation called the phalanx, where soldiers stood close together with long spears. This made them almost impossible to defeat in battle. To make sure his army was ready for war, Alexander trained them in new battle tactics, made sure his soldiers were loyal to him, not just to Macedonia. encouraged a strong bond between him and his men, fighting alongside them instead of just giving orders. By 334 BC, Alexander had secured his kingdom and built a strong, disciplined army. He was now ready to begin his great conquest, an invasion that would change history forever. Chapter 4: The Persian Campaign, Conquering an Empire. After securing his throne, Alexander set his sights on the Persian Empire, the largest and most powerful empire in the world at that time. The Persians controlled lands from Greece to India, and they were led by King Darius III. Alexander believed that conquering Persia would fulfill his father's dream and prove his greatness as a leader. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed into Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, to begin his campaign. His first major battle was at the Battle of Granicus. The Persian army had gathered to stop him, but Alexander's army was well prepared and highly skilled. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's forces won a decisive victory. This battle opened the path to Persia and showed the world that Alexander was a powerful and determined leader. After the victory at Granicus, Alexander continued his march south, heading toward Syria and the Persian heartland. In 333 BC, he faced King Darius III at the Battle of Issus. Darius had a much larger army, but Alexander's tactics and the bravery of his soldiers gave him the upper hand. Darius was forced to flee the battlefield, leaving behind his family and a large amount of treasure. This victory was important because it showed that Alexander was not only a brilliant leader but also someone who could defeat even the greatest of enemies. After the battle, Alexander treated Darius's family with respect, which helped to show that he was a leader of honor, not just conquest. After defeating Darius at Issus, Alexander turned his attention to Egypt, which was under Persian control at the time. The Egyptians welcomed him as a liberator because they had suffered under Persian rule. In 332 BC, Alexander was declared pharaoh of Egypt and was given the title of a god. While in Egypt, Alexander founded a new city called Alexandria on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. This city would become one of the most important cultural and intellectual centers of the ancient world. Today, Alexandria is still famous for its ancient library and its role in spreading Greek culture. In 331 BC, Alexander faced King Darius III one more time at the Battle of Gaugamela, sometimes called the Battle of Arbela. This was the largest and most important battle of Alexander's campaign. Darius's army was massive, but Alexander's skillful tactics once again gave him the victory. Darius was forced to retreat, and his empire began to fall apart. After the battle, Alexander marched into Babylon, the capital of the Persian Empire, and took control of the city. He was greeted by the people of Babylon as a liberator, and he respected their customs and religion. Alexander then moved on to Susa and Persepolis, the Persian capitals, where he burned the grand palace to the ground as a symbol of his victory over Persia. With Darius's defeat, Alexander became the new ruler of the Persian Empire. He claimed the title of King of Kings and took control of the vast Persian territories. His empire stretched from Greece in the west to India in the east, covering much of the known world. However, despite his military success, Alexander's conquest of Persia was not just about power. It was about spreading Greek culture and ideas across the world. The Persian campaign was a turning point in history, and it marked Alexander's rise to becoming one of the greatest military leaders of all time. His victories in the East laid the foundation for the Hellenistic era, a time when Greek culture, philosophy, and art spread far and wide. Chapter 5: Expansion into India and the Limits of Conquest. After his incredible victories in Persia and Egypt, Alexander's empire continued to grow. He marched deeper into Asia, reaching the eastern edge of the known world. His goal was to conquer even more land, and his next major challenge was the mighty Indian subcontinent. In 326 BC, Alexander faced the powerful Indian king Porus at the Battle of Hydaspes, which took place near the Hydaspes River, in present-day Pakistan. King Porus had a large army, including war elephants, which were new and unfamiliar to Alexander's troops. However, Alexander's tactical genius helped him win the battle. He crossed the river at night, surprising Porus's army and forcing them into a difficult position. Alexander defeated Porus in battle, and after his victory, he treated the defeated king with respect. Porus was allowed to keep his kingdom, and Alexander showed him honor, which was a sign of his diplomatic skill. This victory marked the furthest point of Alexander's conquests and proved that he could defeat even the most powerful armies, no matter how different they were from those in the west. Although Alexander had defeated King Porus and now controlled a large part of India, his army was tired. For years, they had been fighting non-stop, traveling through deserts, mountains, and harsh climates. Many of his soldiers were eager to return home after such long and exhausting campaigns. In 327 BC, as Alexander continued to push further into India, his army reached the Beas River. Here, his men refused to march any further. They had been away from home for almost 8 years, and the thought of continuing into the unknown, with no end in sight, was too much. They were afraid of what might lie ahead and wanted to return to Macedonia. Alexander was frustrated and disappointed, but he respected their wishes. He was forced to turn his army back and began the long journey home. This moment marked the end of his expansion into India and the limits of his conquests. After turning back, Alexander headed toward Babylon to reorganize his empire. Along the way, he made plans for new cities, the spread of Greek culture, and the integration of the people he had conquered. Unfortunately, Alexander's journey back would not last long. In 323 BC, after returning to Babylon, Alexander fell seriously ill. Some historians believe he contracted a fever, while others suggest that he was poisoned. He died on June 10, 323 BC, at the age of just 32. His death shocked the world, and his empire, which stretched from Greece to India, was left without a clear successor. Though Alexander's empire did not survive long after his death, his conquests left a lasting mark on the world. His empire spread Greek culture, language, and ideas throughout the regions he conquered. This cultural blending led to the Hellenistic era, where Greek influence mixed with Eastern traditions, creating new art, science, and philosophy. In the years following his death, his generals, known as the Diadochi, fought for control over his empire, splitting it into smaller kingdoms. However, Alexander's legacy lived on, influencing future leaders and cultures for centuries. His military genius, vision of a united world, and lasting cultural impact made him one of the greatest conquerors in history. Chapter 6: Death and the Fall of His Empire. Alexander's sudden death at the age of just 32 left the world in shock. After such great victories and the creation of one of the largest empires in history, many wondered how such a young and brilliant leader could die so unexpectedly. His death led to the collapse of his empire and the start of a new chapter in history. In 323 BC, after returning to Babylon from his campaigns in India, Alexander became seriously ill. He experienced high fever, pain, and weakness for several days. Some historians believe he died of a fever, possibly caused by malaria or typhoid fever. Other theories suggest that he may have been poisoned, but there is no solid evidence to support this. Despite his illness, Alexander's death came very suddenly. His generals and advisors were left in confusion, and no clear plans had been made for the succession of his empire. In his final days, Alexander did not name a specific heir, which caused uncertainty about who would take control of the vast lands he had conquered. With Alexander's death, the empire was thrown into chaos. His mother, Olympias, his wife, Roxana, and his son, Alexander IV, were left as potential claimants to the throne. However, none of them had the power or military support needed to maintain control. Alexander's generals, known as the Diadochi, fought among themselves to take power. They were experienced and powerful men who had served Alexander throughout his campaigns, but without him, they had no clear leadership. Ptolemy, one of Alexander's most trusted generals, took control of Egypt and later became the ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Seleucus gained control of much of the eastern part of the empire, including Persia and Mesopotamia. Antigonus, another general, took parts of Asia Minor and Syria. Cassander, a former bodyguard of Alexander, took control of Macedonia and Greece. These generals divided Alexander's empire into several smaller kingdoms, each ruled by one of the Diadochi. This division led to the Hellenistic period, where Greek culture spread across much of the ancient world, but the unity of Alexander's empire was lost. Although the Diadochi continued to rule large areas of Alexander's former empire, they were unable to hold it together as a unified state. The division of the empire caused many years of wars and conflict between the generals. Alexander's dream of a united empire under one ruler was shattered, and his empire soon fell into chaos. His death also led to the decline of the Macedonian Empire. The regions that had been united under Alexander became independent kingdoms, each with its own rulers. These kingdoms continued to share Greek culture and ideas, but were no longer one empire. The influence of Alexander's empire continued to affect the world for centuries, but his direct control ended shortly after his death. Though Alexander's empire did not survive his death, his legacy lived on. The Hellenistic era, which followed the fall of his empire, saw the spread of Greek culture, language, and ideas throughout the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. This blending of Greek and Eastern cultures led to advances in art, science, philosophy, and trade. Alexander's influence on history is still felt today. He remains one of the greatest military leaders of all time, and his conquests reshaped the ancient world. His vision of a world where cultures could come together through trade, learning, and understanding continues to inspire people today. Even though his empire did not last, Alexander's impact on the world is still remembered and celebrated. Chapter 7: Alexander's Legacy. Although Alexander's empire was divided shortly after his death, his legacy continued to shape the world for centuries. His conquests and vision for a united world had a profound and lasting impact on both the East and the West. One of Alexander's greatest achievements was the spread of Greek culture across the lands he conquered. This period, known as the Hellenistic era, saw Greek ideas, art, philosophy, and language mix with local traditions in the regions of the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. As a result, Greek became the common language for many people in these areas, and it influenced art, architecture, and scientific thought. Cities like Alexandria in Egypt became centers of learning, attracting scholars from all over the world. The famous Library of Alexandria, which housed many ancient manuscripts, became one of the largest and most important libraries of the ancient world. In these cities, Greek ideas mixed with local knowledge, leading to important advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Alexander's encouragement of cultural exchange led to new ideas about government, trade, and social life. His empire, though short-lived, left a lasting imprint on the world by spreading Greek ideals of democracy, philosophy, and art far beyond Greece's borders. After Alexander's death, his empire was divided among his generals, known as the Diadochi. These generals established their own kingdoms, most notably the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in Persia and Mesopotamia, and the Antigonid dynasty in Macedonia. These Hellenistic kingdoms continued to be influenced by Greek culture and were often led by rulers who saw themselves as successors to Alexander. The Hellenistic kingdoms served as cultural bridges between East and West. They facilitated trade between regions that had previously been disconnected, and many of these kingdoms lasted for centuries, continuing to promote Greek culture and learning long after Alexander's death. Alexander's military achievements were remarkable. His ability to lead and inspire his soldiers in battle was unmatched. He used clever tactics and innovative strategies that made him nearly unbeatable. His army was well-trained, disciplined, and loyal, and Alexander's personal courage and leadership set him apart from many other rulers of his time. His military tactics are still studied in military academies around the world, and his campaigns are seen as examples of leadership and strategy. Many later generals, including Napoleon Bonaparte, admired and were influenced by Alexander's methods of warfare. Alexander's vision for the future was one of unity between cultures. He encouraged his soldiers to marry local women, adopt local customs, and learn local languages. In many cities, he founded new Hellenistic-style cities and promoted the spread of Greek culture. This blending of East and West created a unique cultural environment that allowed for the exchange of ideas, technologies, and traditions. Alexander believed in the fusion of cultures, and his hope was that the lands he conquered would eventually come together under one peaceful, united world. Although his empire did not survive his death, the idea of a world connected by trade, culture, and ideas lived on through the Hellenistic kingdoms and beyond. Alexander remains a symbol of leadership, ambition, and bravery. His story has inspired countless books, movies, and works of art. He is remembered not just for the lands he conquered, but for his relentless pursuit of greatness and his desire to push the boundaries of what was possible. Alexander's life shows that a single person can change the course of history. Despite his early death, his vision, achievements, and legacy continue to influence the world today. His empire may have fallen, but his contributions to culture, science, and leadership have endured for more than 2 millennia. Chapter 8. Conclusion. Alexander the Great's life was nothing short of extraordinary. From his early years in Macedonia to his remarkable conquests that stretched from Greece to India, Alexander shaped the course of history in ways few leaders have. His military genius, bold vision, and ability to unite different cultures left a lasting legacy that continues to influence the world today. While his empire did not survive long after his death, the Hellenistic era that followed was marked by a rich exchange of ideas and culture between East and West. Alexander's encouragement of cultural blending helped spread Greek culture across vast regions, leaving a lasting impact on art, science, and philosophy. Though his empire may have been divided after his death, Alexander's leadership, military tactics, and vision of unity serve as an enduring inspiration to leaders and scholars worldwide. His ambition to create a world connected by shared knowledge, trade, and understanding was a vision ahead of its time. In the end, Alexander the Great was not just a conqueror, but a symbol of boundless ambition and the power of leadership. His legacy is a reminder of what can be achieved when vision, determination, and courage come together, and it will continue to inspire generations to come.